What does influence mean to you?
I think influence to me is being inspired by somebody who you aspire to, living the life or the type of life that you're living, and is making an impact, obviously, and that you are keen to follow in their footsteps, and you allow for them to be the source of, hopefully it's positive influence in your life. You can emulate it, you can follow.
Welcome to the Find Your Influence podcast with Anton Guinea, where we unpack all things influence and we help leaders particularly find their influence by talking to amazing humans and finding out what influence means to them, who they've been influenced by and who they have influenced. And this podcast episode, proudly sponsored by the Guinea Group of Companies. The Guinea Group helps leaders upgrade, upskill, uplift their teams and their influence. Welcome to the Find Your Influence podcast with Don Guinea, and we have got an amazing guest today. That amazing guest is Colin Lee. Colin is a Sydney-based property strategist, a buyer's agent, love our buyer's agents, and business founder, best known as the CEO and founder of Inspire Realty. Colin's positioning centres on helping Australians build financial well-being through strategic property investment. Great strategy. Combining portfolio strategy, financial coordination, acquisition support, and ongoing management guidance. That sounds like a one-size-fits-all property package. Inspire Realty presents itself as a full-service property advisory and buyers advocacy firm with a public track record of strong client satisfaction. And I love this. I've never seen a Google review list like this. So if anyone out there, if our viewers or our listeners are worried or thinking, how effective is this human at his job? Colin Lee has got 170 plus 5-star reviews on the about page of his business and 190 plus 5-star reviews on your main website. Man, that is off tap. Before I bring Colin in, let me tell you some more stuff because it's quite cool. Inspire Realty started in 2020. Colin leads the firm's strategic direction. Also promoted publicly as the author of Play the Property Game. So Colin's an author too, and which is an educational resource helping everyday Aussies take control of their financial future through property investment. Welcome, Colin Lee. Thanks for joining us. So Colin, what did I forget from that intro, mate? What else would you like to tell our listeners and viewers just about the work that you do or how you got to this work even?
Thank you for that, Anton. I think for me, I'd like to maybe start my story about 26 years ago, back in 1999, which is a little while ago, but my parents and I migrated from Malaysia. Dad was a senior banker. Mum was a university law lecturer with a Oxford master degree. In 1999, two of my siblings and I were gathered in a living room. Dad basically said to us kiddos, we're moving, pack your bags. We're moving to Australia, so let's do that. So in 2000, my dad and I came to Australia. I was the only one that could drive. My dad and I drove a car, landed in Adelaide, and it was during winter, so it was cold as anything. You remember as well, just to give you some context, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia is where I come from. It's a city of about 15 million people. And coming to Adelaide was a massive culture shock. But the whole idea was for my dad and I to figure out which city. We've already agreed that Australia is the place that we're going to come and establish ourselves. So Adelaide was a massive shock. And Dad and I looked at each other and go, man, is this a small farm town? I mean, where are we? And I remember Dad saying, I'm not sure if this is if this is correct. So then we went to Melbourne, and Melbourne was good, but I think it was the 4 seasons in a day. And coming from a tropical country was very difficult for us to get used to. Anyway, so we went to Canberra, and it was very, very cold. We had a sheet of ice on our windscreens, and we thought, man, I don't know if we can get used to this. And then we went to Sydney. As cold as it was, the vibe, I guess just the people and the activity, like not many places closed at 5 o'clock. So we decided that Sydney was going to be the place that we're going to live in. And that was in 2000. So we brought the entire family. And Dad was, he was, okay, well, let's go and look for a property. And so we did. We found a place. We rented a place. Whilst all that is happening, Dad then went out to look for a job. And I think he had this dream and desire that he was going to do well in Australia. And so went for a few job interviews to see if he can get back into the banking industry. He's been in the bank for about 30 years. And like most migrant story, Anton, my dad was rejected time and time again, simply because, he didn't have the local experience in working with the bank here. So it was very unfortunate for him. 9 months.
So let me just clarify. So it wasn't a racial thing. It was just an Australian experience thing, or was it?
Maybe there was a little bit of that. I mean, Dad was already 47 when he came, and and with a very thick, and here we are, with a very thick Malaysian accent, which sounds a bit like this. When you talk, is very strong Malaysian English, and there's no doubt when he presented himself, you can tell he's not the native Australian accent, and I think maybe that had some influence, just a little bit. And it was a challenge for him because 9 months later, and rejection after rejection, eventually Dad had to settle in and settle down as a business analyst, which is really just starting from ground up again. And I remember as a young 21-year-old just seeing how Dad was so heavily impacted. You got to remember, Dad was a senior banker managing hundreds of staff members in Malaysia, and coming here having to work as a business analyst for West Farmers from the ground up. I mean, I remember Dad coming around one day and he says, "Colin, you will not believe this. I am nearly 50 and I'm answerable to a 25-year-old manager." And it really knocked his confidence around, and yeah, I got to see how hard my parents worked. I mean, it was a big price and sacrifice that they made. Can you imagine 3 kids under 20 moving into a brand new country, having to start again? I'm 45 now. I can't imagine myself doing that.
Wow.
And so at the age of 21, I basically said,
Just hold on. Are Mum and Dad still in Australia? Do
they
they still?
are, they are.
Oh, good. So they didn't give up on the Aussies. They stayed.
No, they stayed. We don't give up easy. But it was
Oh,
very
good.
hard on my mom and dad. I mean, we lived a slightly above average life in Malaysia, and coming to Australia was certainly a knock on their confidence, that's for sure. Anyway, so at the age of 21, I said to myself, man, they've worked hard, they paid the price, they made the sacrifice. And I had this dream at 21 that if one day, if I could, I'd honor my parents and I'll retire them. And I retired them 7 years ago.
Whoa. Congrats.
Thank you.
I retired my parents. Wow. So what does that look like? Does that look like giving them a big chunk of cash or giving them a retainer or like, what's that? How do you retire your parents? Do they work for you so they don't have to work for anyone else? Like,
Actually, my parents did work for me for a period of time when I ran my
right.
they
I like it.
ate their way through. No, my dad and mom had a sizable mortgage on their place of residence. And so they didn't have any investments. There was no financial plan ahead of them. And so I paid off a portion of their mortgage, and then I commit every year, a few $1,000s for them to spend on their holiday and do what you want.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Geez, that's good, isn't it? That's really big heart stuff, Colin. Big heart.
Well,
Thanks
that's
for sharing.
the driver, and that's the motivation. And from day one, that's what I was driven to do.
Our listeners and viewers, do you hear that? That was the driver and the motivation. If your why's big enough, the how works itself out, right? Wow, cool, great story. And so at 21, you made this decision that you're going to you're going to retire mum and dad, no matter how long it takes, because you're going to make life easier for them. Because at the end of the day, they've sort of tried to do the best for you. Now, and the vehicle or the path that you took was property.
Yes, absolutely. It was my property assets that allowed me to release some equity and obviously contribute that towards the mortgage. And I paid out them parents' mortgage years ago now, so they're completely debt free. Every dollar that they get from me is for them to spend, and they travel 3 months in a year, which is
Nice. They go back to. Can you just say for all our viewers? I love hearing Malaysian to say Kuala Lumpur. I love how you say it.
Kuala Lumpur.
I love it. Love it. Love it. We just call it Kuala Lumpur.
That's right.
Mate, that's really, really cool. A big why. You found property, but I'm just trying to get back to the 21-year-old you, mate, 24 years ago when you made this big decision. But when you're 21, you're either one of two types of humans I've found. One is I'm going to go and change the world and I'll find a way. Another one is the world's too big. What the hell am I going to do? I've got no idea. So you're obviously the former, and you said I'm going to go and make this big thing happen. But then you jump forward and you said, property allowed me to do that. But what was like you're in the Sydney market. Just for everyone out there listening, the mean property value in Sydney is going to be $1.5 million or something like that, right? So you're 45, man. You don't just have a big portfolio of $1.5 million properties. Fortunately for you, you were there 20 years ago before it went. And if you were smart enough, you bought enough properties that have probably doubled in price since then. So you've seen some equity growth. But why property? Why not shares? Why not, you know, tennis courts? Like why property?
So why property? Long and short of it is that my property portfolio gave me the freedom and flexibility to start my business in the very first place. So in 2019, many years, I've been in the property industry for about 15 years. I'll go back to that story later on, but just to answer your question very quickly, in 2019, I was at the peak of my career. I was the head of strategic property services for one of Australia's largest property investment services company. To give you some scale and context, they would sell about 2,000 properties every year. There were 5 offices in Asia. I mean, it's a big company. It's a big organization, and I've been about 3 years in the business. We're doing really well. And China was a very big client of ours, in terms of the Chinese investors. And what happened in 2018, 2019, Australia and China weren't really in good terms, let's put it quite simply. And so a lot of the Chinese investors were a little bit less confident about investing in Australia. That, even though, Australian property has always been a very strong investment for Asian investors. But that year it was a big struggle. Anyway, I got married in 2019. That was in March. In April of 2019, my wife fell pregnant. So between April and September, October, she was getting a bit more pregnant, and more pregnant. She was getting bigger, and and eventually we decided we was going to go on our baby moon. We went to New Caledonia, spent the best 10 days in New Caledonia. It was the happiest time of our life. Everything was going well and swell. When we came back, it was in around October of 2019. And I get pulled into my director's room and he says, Colin, I want to have a very serious chat with you. And when you sense that something is not quite right, and then he looks me in the eye and he goes, Colin, I really hate to do this, but unfortunately we're going to go through a massive restructuring of the entire business, and your role's, redundant. And at that time, I had 7 mortgages. I had a 7-month-old baby, on the way, and it was a very, very testing and challenging time of my life. I mean, truth be told, I didn't know what to do with myself, as a father and as a husband. Your job is to protect and to provide, and I felt, I couldn't even really do that with no jobs inside. And so I spoke to my wife about this, and I said, "Look, honey, I hate to do this, but I've just lost my job, and we've got to move forward. What do we do?" And my wife says, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I've always wanted to go back into business." And I said, "I've been in the industry for about 15 years already. Now it's probably my time. I'm already 40 years old. It's now or never." And so I said, "Well, let's I want to start my own business. I don't know what it's going to look like." And she says, "Well, I'll back you up." And I said, "Look, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll take absolute full responsibility. If it works, it's me. If it doesn't work, well, we'll find a way." But truth be told, it was then the our property portfolio was what gave us a bit of freedom and flexibility. We had a bit of a safety net, and so we knew that the absolute worst case scenario was that we would sell off our property portfolio to fund whatever the next season in life is going to throw at us. So why property? Property gives us, if you build a very good asset, it's a safety net. And to be quite frank, I build that portfolio because I wanted to have enough assets that will ultimately generate me, a degree of passive income for me to be able to not have to work full time and to have the freedom and the time to do the things that I enjoy doing, to follow my dreams and my passion. to spend time with people that I love spending time with. I mean, that was the dream. Um,
Wow.
and had I
And to retire your parents.
exactly and to retire my parents.
Wow, mate, great story. Great story. Well done. Congrats on getting 7 properties in the Sydney market. We had sort of a similar number up here in one town in Gladstone, which is boom and bust. And Sydney's sort of been on an uphill trajectory, whereas when you buy regionally, as you know, it's probably not as safe. There's some people that are probably listening to this going, oh, it's Sydney or Brisbane is where probably or Melbourne even now, or maybe Perth. Perth's probably a bit seasonal as well, sadly, because of the mining
Correct.
industry. But I love that the property's given you that ability to sort of being able to restructure and then rebuild, then rebrand, because all of a sudden now you've got this personal brand, and off you went 5 years ago. And here you are 5 years later, being a buyer's advocate, helping people manage their properties. Mate, who sort of got you into property originally? Who influenced? Actually, before I even ask you that, what does influence mean to you? I always ask people, what does influence mean to you?
That's a good question. I've never really thought about that. I think influence to me is being inspired by somebody who you aspire to, uh, living the life or the type of life that you're living, and is making an impact, obviously, and that you are keen to follow in their footsteps, and you allow for them to be the source of, hopefully it's positive influence in your life. You can emulate it, that you can follow.
And I know I say this on most podcast people. If you're a listener or viewer regularly to these shows, you will know Colin summed it all up in like one sentence. Influence means inspiration, means that you've had an impact on another human. Those are the 3 most common words.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put in a model. Influence comes first, then we impact another human, and then we inspire them to greatness. So I think, well said, well put, beautiful. And I define influence, Colin, as the positive effect on the behavior, character, or development of a human or a thing. It might be a project or something like that, but positive impact on behavior, character, or development. So, anyway, so who influenced you in the early days? I'm guessing it was Dad, because you and Dad were pretty tight. But is there anyone professionally that you can think of that had a massive influence on why you bought property in the first place, or just why you do what you do?
No, it's definitely not organic. I mean, definitely, I've
Right.
had multiple influences in my life.
Oh,
But
cool.
there's a saying, obviously, you're the average of the people that you surround yourself with. But also equally importantly, who do you end up listening to? And so anyway, I mean, I look, everything happens for a reason, but I probably rewind back a little bit. In 2011, you got to remember in 2000. So actually, let me go back a little bit. In 2002, I had started my engineering degree, and 2.5 years into it, very shortly after, I actually realized that engineering is really not what I wanted to do. So I actually dropped out of uni to my mother's absolute dismay and disappointment. She couldn't believe it. But I knew I had to go on a different pathway, because I knew inherently deep inside of me, engineering really wasn't what I wanted to do. In 2004, I actually started my very first business, Shift International, which provided educational workshops, not only privately, but also to schools. We designed the WorkWise workshop, which really was all about giving practical skills to students to help them to transition from school into the workforce. And so it was it was an influential company. We would have inspired over 60,000 young people in those 7 years that we had been in operation. And the story goes that in 2011, and by the way, just on a side note, in 2007, I put myself up for an award for the Australian Small Business Champion Awards, and I actually took out Young Small Business Champion Entrepreneur. And we won the Best Educational Services Provider as well for Shift International. So on the surface, Anton, everything seemed like it was going well. And in 2011, I remember I was looking at my bank account, my bank statement, and I looked at it, and it was $2,500 in it. And I thought, you know what? This is so interesting. I've obviously, had a huge influence, huge impact, but I didn't have really the money to show for it. There was no profitability to show for it. So then I had to ask myself, if I keep doing this, am I going to be better off? I've been 7 years running this business, and I realize if nothing changes, nothing changes. And I thought, surely profit has to follow purpose. And the problem is, I was very much on purpose, but profit wasn't following. And I remember I was saying to myself, well, what else can I do? Is this really my life pathway? And I realized if nothing changes, nothing changes. So I had to do something a little bit different. And to be quite frank with you, I started to look up, well, how do I best make money? How do I build wealth? How do I make money quick? How do I get rich quick, really? And obviously there's no such thing, but I realized what came up very frequently in my Google search, in my research, in my reading, was that property was a very common thing for a lot of wealthy Australians in how they build their wealth. I remember picking up a magazine. It was the BRW Rich List, 200 wealthiest people in Australia. And I was reading that. And I was reading the stories of all these wealthy people, the billionaires and the millionaires. And I realized that a lot of them had amassed a very sizable property portfolio. So they were building their business, but at the same time, they were investing in their property portfolios. And then it dawned on me that maybe property is the way to go. So that intrigued me enough. And you know what it's like when you're in there and you're in property is at the forefront of your mind. I started looking for seminars and books. And so I ended up signing up for this thing with Robert Kiyosaki. And you talk about the person that had an influence, not directly. I think indirectly, I wasn't personally coached by Robert in any way. I did attend his workshops, but he talked about the quadrants and having a rich dad mindset. And wealth is all about having the right mindset, because you can have all these ways of making wealth, but if you don't have the mindset to create that, I think that's where the real problem is. So he talked a lot about having a good mindset, and the quadrants on how you can have an employee mindset, but how do you have an employer mindset? How do you add value to your business, and how do you become an investor? And obviously, Robert Kiyosaki is very much a property investor himself. He's very property. And so I signed up for his course. Long story short, the person that had the greatest influence on my life is actually a friend that I met at the seminar. We resonated because we were both Asians. He was a Vietnamese guy, and he came actually as a refugee. Not even, at least my parents came as a skilled migrant. And English, get this, English wasn't in his first language. And so we became good friends. I realized he was only 2 years older than I was. And he tells me his story, and he says to me, like, my parents work really hard, and in our family we've invested in 5 properties. And I was amazed by that. I mean, uh, and then I said, what do you do? And so he tells me he runs a property management and a property sales business, Metro. And I said, man, this is great. So we became friends. And many months later, we connected. And I said, actually, Joseph, I am looking to change industry, and I'm looking for an industry that I can be passionate in. And so I said, well, would you take me in? And so he says, well, we'll do that. So he gave me my very first job as a junior property manager. I'll never forget that. It was in 2011. And you got to realize in back what I was doing in Shift International, I was the CEO, I was the founder, I was an influencer, I was a speaker, I was a motivation speaker, I was running workshops, I've been featured in newspapers, and now I'm shifting pathways and just humbling myself to start again in a brand new industry, which is in real estate. And he had a very direct influence in me getting into the industry, Anton.
Sounds like someone else you knew had to take a step back to take a step
That's
forward.
exactly right. I was reminiscing of my dad's journey, and sometimes you got to take 2 steps forward, 2 steps backwards to take, 3 steps backwards instead. Yeah,
Yes. Well done, mate. I love that. Now, are you still in touch with Joseph?
I mean, I moved to Brisbane.
Oh, are you in
I am
Brizzy?
in Brizzy.
There you go. Sorry, we've
I moved to Brisbane about
Sydney,
5
mate.
years ago, but yes, we are in touch every now and then. I mean, he's a sales agent, and he still runs a property management business. I've transitioned fully into representing the buyer and being a buyer's advocate and a buyer's
Awesome.
agent. Yeah. So
I love buyer's agents. And for anyone out there that doesn't know, a buyer's agent, Colin Lee, does.
well, we help our clients to acquire property, so we call ourselves acquisition specialists. But you go, yeah, I'm more than a buyer's agent. I mean, a bit more
Sounded like that. Sounded like you
yes,
were.
a
Yeah.
buyer's agent, but I'm actually more of a property investment advisor. Think of me like a sort of
Right.
trainer uh, in the
Ah,
property game.
I like that. Personal trainer for houses. I love property in general. I love it, mate. Well said. So just from an influence perspective, what was it about Joseph that made you wanting to go and work for Joseph and be willing to, to go sort of a few steps back from CEO to probably the bottom of the org chart? What was it about Joseph that was so influential?
Well, I mean, he's got the result that I wanted. He's a lot further on. He's got 5 times the results of where I'm at. He had a good life. He was healthy. He was he was going to church and he was happy. And in all accounts, he was someone that I admired and someone that I could emulate and follow in his pathway. So I opened myself humbly to start again, and that was a big leap of faith. But there were a number of things that he did for me. I think he knew that I had an entrepreneurial mindset. I mean, clearly it wasn't a business that was scalable and sustainable in the long term. And he saw my potential and he says, Colin, I know you'll do well in real estate if you simply but treat this like your own business. And so one of the first things he said to me is, Colin, I know you're a junior property manager, but I want you to treat this like your own business. And the whole idea of the amount you're earning is directly proportional to the value that you're adding to an organization, and that's what he said in the first place. Because Colin, I want you to just imagine if you were the CEO of the business, what would you do? And so he empowered me all throughout my career to go, well, actually, yeah, this is good. Thank you for the suggestion. What would you do? And so he guided me the whole way through. He resourced me the whole way through. And he says, treat it like your own business. So literally within 6 months of me being a junior property manager, my role, by the way, was do two things. Man, this is how humbling it was: is to ring up tenants and to make sure that they're paying their rents on time. I was given a list of all these tenants and all those that were days or weeks late behind their rent. I was literally calling them to almost plead and say, look, you better make your rent. I was like a debt collector. I mean, that's how humbling it was. And then the second thing, I had to arrange these inspections to do these routine inspections. So literally go and see how they live, take photos, and that's the bottom of the pile. But I put my heart into it, and then my dad always said to me, "Son, I want you to remember something. If anything is worth doing, do it well. Otherwise, don't do it at all. Wear your heart on your sleeve. Just do it well. Be the best, whatever you're doing." So I was the best. I wanted to be the best junior property manager that I could, and so that's what I did. I put a lot of effort into getting to know the tenants. I was enthused about them. I understood this story. Literally within 6 months, he says, Colin, I'm going to promote you. And then I became a property manager, you know, and, uh, and that was a big turning point in my life as well, Anton. And then he said something to me that day. He said, Colin, I'm going to show you a little bit of a secret in terms of how I've been successful. He said this: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. As cliche as it sounds, he then picked up this book of his. There's a little notebook. And in the notebook, he flicked his pages and he goes, I want you to look at this. This is a client, Russ and Sadie. This is the story. This is the vision. This is what they do for a living. These are how many kids they have. This is their favorite coffees. This is their dream. This is the places they want to go visit. This is their dogs' names. And it was everything that he knew about a client. And he said to me, every time you talk to somebody, I don't want you to go, hey, how are you? It's like, man, how's Sadie? How's your mom? So that's
You know what I mean? How's
yeah,
your
how's
dog?
your dog?
Those
Yeah,
words.
how's your dog? How's your trip overseas? And so then it became like you genuinely cared about them and where they are in their life. It's less about how's your property, how's it's going to where they're at, and just being genuinely concerned about where they're in their life. And I was like, wow. So from that day forward, I started taking notes, and from that day, I have notes in every single person I speak with.
Whoa.
And that was a big thing for me. And so
Know about know about their story. Know about what's important to them. Know their spouse's name.
because
Get to know your clients.
Because everyone wants to be seen. Everyone wants to be heard.
Everyone wants to be seen, heard, and felt.
Correct. And that was the biggest wisdom I've learned. And so that was a defining moment in my life. And so he says, Colin, you're ready now. He literally took a spreadsheet and goes, here are the 20 landlords and landladies I want you to connect with, to get to know, and just be friends. And so I did. I picked up the phone, I arranged coffees with all of them, and I got to know their story. I got to know their challenges. I got to know their problems. I got to everything about, and he got to know their stories. And some of them were very intimate. Like I had some people telling me their deepest and darkest secrets, and I was like, wow, I mean, what a privilege it is to know that. It is a privilege to know that, to be in that position where I'm a listening ear, where I genuinely care about. That was a big thing. And almost automatically, almost just organically, there was like, Colin, there's something about you, something about you. And then they told their friends and their families and other landlords and landladies, I mean, all about me. And so I grew my influence then from managing 20 properties to 30 to 50 to 100. Literally within 2 years and a little bit, I grew my portfolio from 20 properties under management to about 220 properties under management. I 10x'd my portfolio, my account management from 20 properties to 220 properties.
Whoa. So going back to, you get paid, so your earnings in an organization, if you're an employee, are directly related to the value you add.
Absolutely.
So all of a sudden, you're adding more value.
Absolutely.
And Joseph would have noticed that. And all of a sudden,
Ab-
you're now earning more because you're doing the work and you're bringing business.
Correct.
Holy crap.
And then
10x.
10x is like he like, I mean, he was amazed, but I think, like any father, he would always say, I think you can do better.
Oh, stop it.
No, really. He was always challenging me to be bigger and better. Absolutely. Take me a pat on the shoulder and he said, come on, keep going. And it was actually opportune because in around the 2.5 year mark, when I was managing all these properties, I was given a property management assistant and I was doing well. And then something shifted. I remember having a very intimate conversation with one of my clients, and he runs a catering business. He was 64 years old, and he goes, Colin, how much more do I really need? He had 5 properties that was under my management. And he goes, Colin, I'm at a time in my life where I want to retire. And I want to see the fruits of all that I've sacrificed and all that I've, obviously stewarded. And he goes, here's my plan. He goes, I'm going to sell off 3 of these properties. I'm going to keep 2 of them. And those 2 properties, I calculated, would have been generating about $110,000 in income. So what he was doing was consolidating his portfolio and actually paying off the debts of the 2 properties.
The other ones. So therefore, you had 2 income generating assets.
2 unencumbered properties, and that would be generating him his $110,000, and that's all he needed. He was happy, he was content, he was grateful with that. So then he said to me, Colin, can you sell off these 3 properties that I'm holding? And I said, sure.
Great answer. Yes.
Yes.
And we start.
And then you find a way to do it, right?
Mm.
And I remember saying to Joseph, mate, like, I've got this client, he's wanting to sell his properties. And I said, I want to get into sales, and I actually just transitioned into sales. And sales is all about just being a good communicator, a good conversationalist, and just making you a good human and doing the right things. And here I was, I stepped in parallel into being a property manager, but at the same time I was being a sales agent. And then eventually I transitioned fully into being a sales agent because now I had all these landlords that I could speak to about consolidating, about moving on, about transitioning from downsizing to upsizing, which is consolidating their investment property portfolios to move to another season in their life. And between 2012 and 2014, Anton, I became the top sales agent for Metro. I was the star performer for 3 years in a row, all because I had built, a sizable, I guess, red roll in property management that I was able to have an influence on, really.
So you went from 10xing your property management portfolio, and then you started at 0 in sales revenue 3 years later, you're the highest performing salesperson
I know.
in Sydney
In Sydney.
or in Sydney.
Well, in Sydney
Stop
for the company. For the
for that
company.
company.
For that company.
Shit, Burrs, mate, that's a great success story. How was Dad at this stage? Was Dad happy yet?
Oh yeah, I mean, like I rewarded my parents on
Of
some
course.
nice things in life. I took them on holidays.
I was going to say, when the commission on Sydney properties, if you're the highest, you would have had some disposable income by that time. So
Quite a
start
fair bit.
starting to realize some of your dreams. Like,
Well, actually, that's when I also started investing in my own personal property.
of course, of
Because
course.
of income and all this savings.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I bought myself a nice car, I had a nice Mercedes coupe, and I had all the nice things. I had like 3,000 books. I love my books. I got the things that I wanted to get, and now it's about preparing myself for the future. And actually, all that I had was invested in properties.
Nice. Prepare for the future. And so, how did you end up from being the top sales agent in the Sydney region for your organisation to working for yourself? Did you realise that there was a market for finding properties that were ready for sale that would be good for investors? Because predominantly you do investor sales, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, 95% of my clients are investors.
Investors, that's right.
Yeah, so
So you knew what to look for. You'd find an investment property. You had a range of people that you could jump on the phone to. Hey, here's a good buy. I'll line you up with this deal. It's only going to cost you $3,000, $5,000, whatever it is in my time. Job done. And all of a sudden you do hundreds and hundreds of them and away you might go.
Well, the inspiration is this. I mean, I hadn't known, but when I was at the peak of my sales career, what I found myself, and I hadn't realized this until many years later, was in the conversations that I had, because as a sales agent, you're dealing with buyers. And what I found myself really doing, and I think that's what worked really well, was because I was putting myself in the shoes of the buyer, knowing the challenges, just how hard it is to get into property. I found myself coaching, mentoring, spending time with them, just giving them some really good tips and tricks on how do you actually, get into the market. And obviously it's down to the budget. I mean, so you got to realize when you're trying to sell a property and there's 50 groups through, only one will get the property. What happens to the 49 that don't get it? They get disappointed. They go, like, I mean, some of them, sure, this is not the right property for them, but for those that have put offers in, those that are genuinely interested, call it 20% of the 50, 19 of them would have missed out on the property. And I found myself feeling for them. I was empathetic. I was feeling sad for them because, at the end of the day, I've got to work in the best interest of the seller and get the highest possible price for the seller at the best possible terms as well. But then you've got a whole bunch of people that missed out. And so I found myself really just trying to help these buyers. Little did I know that many years later, that's what I'm doing. So I know what it's like on the sales agency side. So I always say to my clients, one of my key points of difference is I'm not a buyer's agent that started out as a buyer's agent. I'm a buyer's agent that has been through the whole industry from being a junior property manager to a property manager to a sales agent. In fact, shortly after I became a sales agent, I became a sales manager. And at the peak of my career in Metro, I was actually the principal and licensee in charge. This is what I mean. Like, you keep adding value. There's obviously a financial return for the company. And Joseph said to me one day, Colin, I'd like to make you a partner, but let's give you some shares in the business and would like you to become a principal and a licensee in charge. And that's genuinely the peak of my career.
Can you just say those three things again? So you add value. This is about influencing up. You're influencing Joseph now, not him influencing you. You're saying, and you're doing this through success. I think that's the best way to get opportunities is to influence with success. So you add value first, then you get the opportunity.
Well, I think adding value, there's multiple facets to it. I mean, financial value obviously is really important, but I also
So add financial values. Just
of
find a way.
find a way to increase the revenue of the business. Whilst I was doing that, I was also consciously looking at ways to streamline, to build processes and systems that would effectively run the business. Because there's two ways to profit, right? One is to increase the revenue. The other one is to decrease the cost, of running the business. So if you can find ways, effective ways, find
So
good people,
efficiencies.
efficiencies. Yes.
So find ways to do things in a more streamlined way, because you'll still impact the bottom line if you're saving money, not making it. Right. Wow. You had this business mindset, didn't you? Like really focused. I love that, man. So good. That's like unbelievable. And I love Joseph's mission. And I don't think I've said this to Deb, but I hope I will one day soon. Treat it like your own. Like spend the money like it's your own.
What would you do?
Treat it like it's your own.
And my job now as the CEO and the founder of the business is to empower my team to make good decisions. What would you do? And so I'm there to reflect them, to resource, them to do what they need to do. I mean, with my guidance, but I want to be in a position like Joseph was for me, just to be a good positive influence, but to allow me to make my own mistakes. Geez, have I made mistakes? I've made some bad calls. I've spent some stupid money on marketing, and so like he allowed me to make my own mistakes, and it was costly. Let's be honest, but I was always conscious of the bottom line. For me, I'm conscious of the bottom line. I'm conscious that you're only as good as the value that you're adding to the company. So for me, it was always, if it was my own business, what would I do? So
What would I do? So this is a really interesting one. This is a good one for our listeners and our viewers. You're only as good as the value that you're adding. That is powerful, because there'll be listeners out there that this might be a bit confronting for, because it's like, hold on a second. If you're in an organization, there's value add component to that. You're only as good as what you're doing for the bottom line. Shit. That's pretty.
I mean, let's be really practical and pragmatic about it. I mean,
Of course,
your profit is the name of the game. Why?
profit's the name of the game, but at the end of the day, you're not paying bills if you don't have turnover. Profit's the name of the game. That's right. Turnover is good, but it's how much you're taking home, because you're not paying your bills if you don't have profit.
Of course. And to be a little bit more spiritual about it, I mean, you've got to make sure that you're running a business with a strong purpose, with strong ethics and strong morality. Of course, you're doing the right thing. You're providing a genuine service that helps the client go from zero to hero. Ultimately, you've got to maintain the bottom line, because there's too many. And then do you know businesses, 50% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. So imagine you've got 100 businesses around. Why do 50 businesses fail in the first 5 years? Because they're all about passion and they're all about purpose, which is all a beautiful thing. But because they don't, and statistics have shown that the main reason why businesses fail is because their bottom line or their profit is not there. So you can only run on your own investment for so long. If you're not profitable, all that is just in vain. Like, the influence is all good, but you're gonna have to profit to be able to show for it. That's when you're genuinely adding value, but you've got to be.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's right. I think that's the measure. I always say some of the toughest times that like I've had in business over 20 years, I've had some tough times. And, I put out a podcast one day and I said, you know what, or probably more of a post. I'm not making much money at the moment. And this was probably 5 years ago. And I said, I just realized that I'm just not doing enough for people. Like, because if I was, they'd be paying me. And so, I'm not doing enough. I'm not adding enough value to be being paid enough for what I'm worth. And so the more value you add, the more you get paid. So you're 100%. And turnover or profit are just a result of how much value you add to the planet. Yeah. If you make enough people, if you help enough people achieve their goals, Colin, they'll help you achieve yours from client perspective. Mate, Colin, you are so articulate. You've been amazing to speak to. There is such value in this podcast, mate. Thank you so very much. That's amazing. Just very, very quickly, and I've got a coaching client coming at 2:30. 2:30 or Brizzy time. So there's 2 questions left. First one is, what's your leadership philosophy? What's your quote? What's your mantra? What's leadership mean to you, please, mate?
It's a good question. I think there are four words for me. Leadership is about inspiring uh, and being inspired. So inspire and be inspired, right? Inspire because your job as a leader is to inspire your circle of influence, the people around you, be that your direct team or your providers, your partners, and people that you have influence with, your networks. You got to inspire them with your vision, inspire them with your objectives and your mission. For me, the vision of Inspire Realty is to be the most trusted and respected property investment services company in Australia. It's pure and simple. I don't want to be the biggest. I want to be the best. I want to add the most amount of value. I want to make sure that I overservice my clients. And it's actually, I was personally coached by Brian Tracy. I don't know if you know him. He wrote the book Eat the Frog. He's a big American business coach. He coaches presidents and all that. And I remember Brian, it was in a room of about 50 business owners. These are all businesses with the minimum of turnover $1 million. The average turnover of business in the room was about 20 million. And he posed a question. He goes, why do we run a business? Why are we in business? And then, I think he had hands up, oh, because we want to make money, we want to have influence, we want to profit, we want to solve problems, we want to change the world. He goes, all that is good. The purpose of a business is to make happy clients. And I thought, wow. And it's the whole adage of go the extra mile to put a smile on your clients. Like, under promise but over deliver. And so for me, it's about creating systems and processes to genuinely service my clients so that they're happy. A happy client goes a long, long, long way. So it's the question is, how do we build the most correct? How do we build the most trusted and respected property investment services company? And so I inspire all the time. I cast vision. I spend time with my team. I get to know this story. I'm genuinely, deeply concerned about their well-being. And if there's anything I can do to support their well-being, just being a good human to them makes a big difference. So that's my mantra, is to inspire them. I mean, so it's all just the different levels. For me, I'm at, at this level, say, and I influence and I inspire people that are reporting to me, that look up to me. Okay. But at the same time, I'm inspired by the people that I'm standing on the shoulders of because they've gone further and beyond where I am at. So I've got to be humble enough to go, I don't know it all. I'm always open to learning, to allowing myself to be, to be coached and to be mentored. So that's where the be inspired comes from. So inspire, but at the same time, be inspired. Be humble and hungry enough to be inspired, but be encouraging and empowering enough to share your wisdom, your ideas, to add value, to your team and to your clients and to your partners and to your networks.
Wow. Hope our viewers and listeners have got heaps and heaps of value from this conversation, because I know I have. Thank you so much, mate. And what you've inspired me to do is I need to be clearer on our vision, which is to be the world authority on leadership, thought leadership on leadership. So we work with leaders everywhere. We do psychological safety. We do all the leadership stuff. And, we want to be the Simon Sinek or the John Maxwell, but I wonder whether that's inspiring enough, and it needs a bit more clarity. So I think, thank you. You've inspired me to do some work on that too.
Thank you, Anton.
Very last question. We have some great humans like you on this podcast. Would you mind, pretty please, introducing us to someone or some people that you think would be amazing for our podcast, pretty please?
Of course. We'll definitely be more than happy to do that.
You're a gentleman. We'll send you through an email after this podcast. Deb will follow up, and if you could make some intros, that'd be gratefully appreciated to fill our pipeline and keep sharing these amazing stories with our listeners and viewers. So, Colin,
Thank you, Anton.
Top of the class, mate. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening or viewing our Find Your Influence podcast with Anton Guinea. Another great chat. Please be one of the 10% of people who follow and subscribe and like our videos so that you can get more of them and you can hear more of our amazing conversations, the conversations that I get to have and that I get to share.